my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my June 2024 reading wrap-up. We have audiobooks, we have manga, we of course have Pride Month. I will have the content warnings for everything that I can find linked down below in the description, along with links to some resources, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started. First up is I Hear the Sunspot by Yuki Fumino, and this is a BL series that follows Kohei, who is deaf and has kept his distance from life on campus as he is often misunderstood. That is until he meets Taichi, who tells him that his hearing loss is not his fault, which opens Kohei's heart and breaks through all of his defenses. So I read this first volume along with its sequel volume, Theory of Happiness, and then also the first volume of Limit this month, and this had a very strong start for me. I adored this first volume so much. I love the characters, I love the art style, the humor, and just the overall dynamic between our two main characters here. And I left this volume just feeling so joyful and just so happy. And I am still carrying a lot of those feelings with me now, but I will say based off of those other two volumes, I feel like the series has a tendency to start angst and then not fully resolve it before they move on to the next angsty thing. Which can be fine, they certainly don't have to handle things one at a time, but in this case, it really does feel like things are starting to pile up. And as for the relationship itself, I adore them. I adore both of them individually. I adore them together, but I do think that they have a lot of work to do, specifically Taichi. And I would love to see the series really start to focus in on that and maybe get some good character growth that will also end up benefiting the romance. I still have a lot of love here. I am very hopeful, but we'll see where we go from here too. Next up is going to be an audiobook, and that is Sound the Gong by Joon-ha, which is the sequel to Strike the Zither. Strike the Zither is a reimagining of the Chinese classic Three Kingdoms and follows our main character Zephyr, who has become the best strategist in the land, serving under one of the three warlordesses who are all hoping to claim the continent for themselves. Zephyr is forced to infiltrate an enemy camp in order for her side to survive, where she meets an opposing strategist who is actually able to match her. But she soon finds out that she may have more enemies than she originally thought. I started this audiobook almost immediately after finishing Strike the Zither because I just needed to know where everything was going to go. And the series has a lot of twists and a lot of turns and surprises, so I was very excited for more of that. And yeah, it delivered. I feel like I flew through this. And I will always love an audiobook that I can just turn on and get lost in for hours as a distraction from whatever else it is I am doing. And this definitely has been that series for me, and a lot of what I said for Strike the Zither also holds true for Sound the Gong. And I love the way that everything continued to come to life in this one, and I think that it made a lot of interesting, exciting choices with the storyline, and it's those kinds of choices that will always make the series stand out to me. I'm just not really sure how much I love the ending, especially compared to the rest of the book, and I do think that I ended up enjoying Strike the Zither a little bit more overall, but this was fun as well. I ended up giving Sound the Gong 4 out of 5 stars, and I think my rating for the series as a whole is going to just be my rating for Strike the Zither. So I'm going to give The Kingdom of Three duology by Joon-ha 4.25 out of 5 stars. And next up we have all 8 volumes of Bloom Into You by Nakatani Nia, and this follows our main character, who is a big fan of shoujo manga and has always dreamed of the day where she would receive a confession of her own. However, when that day comes from one of her male classmates, she ends up feeling nothing, and she goes into high school still unsure of how to respond to this person. But she gets inspired when she sees a member of the student council turn down her own suitor, so she goes to ask her for advice. Our main character's romance may have finally begun, however, when the next confession that she receives comes from that student council member herself. I have a full review of this series that should be coming out soon, but for today, I read this first volume a couple of years ago. I did reread it in preparation for all of this, and I have been wanting and just needing to read this series for so many years now, and I am so excited that that has finally happened. And we did get off to a little bit of a slow start, which I wasn't expecting, but once I started really diving into the characters, I was absolutely in love and just so attached to this series. And I eventually did get into the romance as well. It just took a little bit, and it certainly happened in time to make me feel all of the emotions when I needed to feel them the most. And I think the series just has such beautiful moments and character growth that I felt really personally connected to in a way that I am so incredibly grateful for. And yeah, I'll provide more detail about my thoughts on this series in my full video, but for today I will be giving Bloom Into You as a whole 4.75 out of 5 stars. Next up is going to be The Do's and Donuts of Love by Adiba Jagardar, and this follows our main character, who lands a role in the new televised baking competition alongside of her ex-girlfriend. Her dream come true quickly turns even more complicated, however, when she becomes fast friends and maybe even something more more with one of the other contestants. This was a very adorable, fun, kinda cheesy, and ultimately quick read, which was exactly what I wanted from it, but it also does have its more serious moments and topics as well, such as racism and implicit biases, specifically while being on reality television. And I do think that this book did some really interesting things when it comes to the reality competition show aspect, just all around. This book also had a romance that I ended up really liking, and it didn't necessarily go the way that I thought it was going to go, and I enjoyed that about this book a lot. I also felt like this one had a tendency to wrap up its conflicts too quickly, and there were just a few things that still felt unresolved or not fully addressed by the characters or by the story by the end of it. So yeah, it's not perfect. I don't really think that I liked it as much as I loved Honey and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating by this author, but it did have a lot that I really enjoyed about it, and I ended up giving The Do's and Donuts of Love by Adipa Jagradar 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is the audiobook version of The Skin and Its Girl by Sarah Cipher, and this follows a queer Palestinian woman who was born stillborn, turning her skin permanently blue. Years later, she visits her aunt's gravestone with a difficult decision to make between staying in the only country that she has ever known or following the woman that she loves and her heart. She finds her answer in her aunt's notebooks that detail her complex life and struggle with her own sexuality that she kept to herself, and our main character discovers that her aunt kept so much more than that a secret too. There were times where I was fully invested and immersed in this story, and then there were times where I just wasn't, and some of that was when I was just kind of getting to know the characters and their dynamics with one another, and I do think that this book does an incredible job of letting you get to know those characters and those dynamics. Like, I really felt like I knew and cared about these characters by the end of the book, but there were just parts of this storyline that I definitely got into more than others, and I also would have liked to spend a little bit more time in the present timeline with our main character. But speaking of our main character, I really liked her, specifically her humor. It was kind of on the dry and sarcastic side at times, and it was super charming. And this book as a whole had a lot of really beautiful and also really complex relationships. It was definitely not an easy listen all the time, and I thought this book really did hit those emotional notes really hard. There are so many parts of the story that just live so clearly in my brain and will probably be staying there for a long time. But there are also some moments that I know are barely there at all. So I did have some mixed feelings throughout this book, but what I loved and was invested and interested in felt so much stronger. And I ended up giving The Skin and Its Girl by Sarah Cipher 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up is another audiobook, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir and probably one of the books that I've been meaning to read the longest out of the long list of books that I've been meaning to read. But I needed an audiobook one day, and this one is super short. I think it's only about 4 hours long, and I was like, that's perfect, it's time. And this was definitely another hard-hitting one for sure. It dives into some really dark topics, but it also dives into a lot of moments of joy as well. It tells of the author's life and exploration of identity and sexuality as a black person. And they narrate the audiobook as well, which was super cool. And in the beginning of the audiobook, they talk about specifically who they want this story to reach, and that is younger people. And I do think that this book is incredibly important, which makes the book bannings that this book has faced over the years just so incredibly frustrating, to say the least. But yeah, I don't rate memoirs, but this was more than worth the listen for sure. And finally, we have the rest of the manga, which are the series that I am caught up to and reading chapters from as they release over on the Shonen Jump and Manga Plus apps, including, and first and foremost, chapters 108 to 109 of Kaiju number 8, chapters 10.1 to 11 of Kaiju number 8 B-side, chapters 15 and 16 of Ruri Dragon, chapters 35 through 39 of Kagurabachi, chapters 151 to 155 of Blue Box, chapters 112 to 116 of Akane Banashi, and chapters 56 and 57 of You and I Are Polar Opposites. And as per usual, all of these were super good, but I definitely think Akane Banashi had some chapters that were like a little bit extra good this month. So those were probably my favorite, but I am feeling like a little bit sentimental right now because Kaiju number 8 B-side only has 1 chapter left, which makes me sad, and we'll wrap them up next month. But yeah, as usual, I have no complaints here about any of these series, which is super nice. Okay, so that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!